What's up, everyone? You're tuned in to the channel EEPS episode 161. And today, to continue on the art times entrepreneurship, I want to talk about turning setbacks into opportunities. And I call it the 180-degree rule, the 180 rule. Now, it's a philosophy that I seem to continue to do where everyone is looking at one way. I, for some reason, look the other way. And I will cover some specific moments in my digital art career where, like setbacks led to unexpected growth, even when you least expect it, at least when I least expect it. So I hope to offer some practical tips through my endeavors or use cases of my life as an artist, volatile artist. We live and breathe it. We continue to always be volatile. That's the nature of the beast. And yeah, so let's begin. So first of all, I think digital art in itself, okay? A lot of people back then, even today, even to this very day, they don't see digital art as a form of fine art in the eyes of the institution, right? Traditionally, art has always been considered, well, it needs to be oil on canvas, acrylics, landscapes, portraits, in the eyes of the ivory towers. But digital art is, what is it? Like, it's using computers, it's using software to create artwork. Okay. Now, of course, there is confusion for a lot of people. They think, well, you're using software, you're using, computers. You're not doing digital art, you're not doing fine art, you're just doing graphic design or you're doing like illustration. But how does that have a place in the institution gallery world? And that's been something that has I've been always asked these questions. And they would the biggest thing I've been asked is like, oh, it looks very nice, but is it hand drawn? I always get that question. A bit of a pet peeve of mine. But what I realize is what they're asking is, how can I trust if what you're creating is an original? Now, I think the very definition of original, to each their own, right? But I don't want to get too sidetracked. But the fact that he asked that question, is it hand drawn, is a signal that that is the opportunity. That is the 180, where everyone is looking at fine art, whatever we think of it being traditionally fine art. Digital art is this other beast on the other side of the spectrum that is often overlooked. And like, I always use digital tools. I used to play a lot of video games. I still play Brawl Stars. I play Brawl Stars. So I still do video games. But like that really opened up my eyes using digital tools to create. And when I saw this dichotomy of like difference of opinion, I was like, wow, okay, I think there's something there. I think that I need to continue this route and build on this. Despite what people say or the noise saying that, oh, I can't, digital art is not a legitimate form of art, it has no place in the institution. I ignored all that and I just kept on going. And I kept on going despite what people said to me, despite, the support or no support. I just stayed in my lane and I kept on going and I kept on building. So I know it's my career, I spanned about 20 years in the creative industry, but okay, jump to today. It is clear, absolutely clear, that technology, digital tools, has empowered individuals to create, right? You hear the word content creators. You hear artists using digital tools to make works of art, generative art. Like all these, this whole now, I feel like suddenly people are waking up to the fact that yeah, technology is here to stay. Digital tools are here to stay, and we need to take a closer look. We need to understand it. Meanwhile, where everyone was looking in the other direction, I kept on going my lane, and now I have pretty much mastered and have the skill set and discipline with many years, over a decade of knowing exactly, being an expert in this, digital age, in digital arts. So there's one example. Okay. Now the 180 rule is again like when you look at, you have to really see how people are reacting to certain things, and then you always got to flip it. You got to flip the script. You got to give that 180 spin. Okay, okay, well, okay, I'm gonna change my mindset. Like, what if I thought this way? What would happen? What were the outcomes? Why are people reacting this way? And oftentimes, the opportunity lies in the other side of the spectrum. Now, of course, art and code is another thing. Okay. Okay, generative art, it's not a new thing, it's not a novelty, but because I think with the rise of exponential technological progress, um, there are people who, using programming and code to express themselves creatively. Now, that is really going to put a lot of, how do I say, um, you think digital art was confusing. Now, art and code to create generative art, there's digital art and there's generative art. That's another can of worms. But again, it's moving towards, it continues that lineage of using, technology to create new forms of creative expression. And again, I think my first exposure to doing code was when I was doing computer science at a Gong college, and it was a Java class. And the assignment was to create a calculator using the Java swing components. Like, just basically, there are these libraries that you can, import in code. Sorry, I might be just a little bit technical, where it would already generate these buttons for you based on just putting a line of code by importing the library that has that collection of all these different widgets and buttons. So make it a bit easier. The assignment was to develop a calculator where when you press a button, it would actually, do the calculations for you. You would have to program the calculations to make a working calculator. Now that really, uh, gave me so much insight of like, well, that's kind of like how video games are done, right? It's a model view controller. It's a object oriented programming language where you create these different things, you merge it together, and they're all communicating each other, and you create this like system. And I thought it was really cool because not only are we just programming things and seeing things appear on the terminal, like matrix like lines and shit, but we are also seeing a visual representation. And I thought that was really cool. And then, of course, HTML, web browser, web based applications, that sort of like inform my interest even, further in seeing how I can use, uh, code or scripts to create visual appealing things, outputs. And that's what it really is. Now, again, not many people, knew about that as a form of art, um, let alone people, as I mentioned earlier, like questioning what digital art is about. Like, what is that? So, code is a totally different beast. But I kept on going. Despite what people say, despite people ignoring me, not taking me seriously, which I don't know. I'm not saying people, I expect people to take me seriously now, but I was just like, it's just like, oh well, EEPMON's doing whatever, But now, many years later, generative art. is a thing. You could Google that and it'll explain to you what generative art is. And now, as Library and Archives Canada's first creator in residence, I am doing absolutely generative art using data from the archives, combining digital art with generative art data sets with cultural preservation. I'm it's such a it's is it well, okay. I feel I'm just really in my element, really pushing that innovation and envelope, taking something that's historical and visualizing it in a way that it just, how do I say, had I not taken this data to create something, I've discovered so many interesting aspects about the data that I would have not known had I just looked at the spreadsheet. Is what I'm saying. So it's quite an exciting time to be in generative art, right? That was my 180. I kept on going. And where everyone was like totally like not having it with anything digital or creation wise, but here I was pivoting 180. It's not because I decided to do 180 because oh yeah, no, it's because I'm a digital artist. And one thing I learned is to, again, like I mentioned earlier, ignore the noise. People have opinions. They have so much opinions, what they think is right, what they think is the way. But you got to listen to yourself. You got to listen to your voice and knowing what your interests and your passions. No matter, even if the majority of the trend is in that direction, pivoting, flipping the script to what works for you is so crucial in this day and age. Okay? Artists, entrepreneurs, you name it. And I don't want to get too far. I mean, we're at 12 minutes. I want to try to keep these within 15-minute scope. I never walked the traditional path of an artist, okay? I don't have a bachelor's in fine arts. I don't have a master's in fine arts, MFA, right? I have a computer science background at a Gong College. I went to Canterbury High School for the visual arts program, but because of my interest of computers, and I had this sort of like cloud of like, I wanted to create something that's using computers, but I don't know how. But I decided to jump deep into the world of computers and try to really understand more concretely what I'm dealing with. So that's what I did. So a lot of my creative peers went to the art schools and stuff like that. I went into the computer field, okay? And then after that, I went to Carleton University's Bachelor's of Information Technology, Interactive Multimedia Design. That's a mouthful. So as you can see, where most went to the traditional route of the art industry, I carved up my own niche. I made it my own way. And it goes to show that there is no set rule of what constitutes art. 20 years. And I continue to carve my own way forward. And I realized that nothing there's no law, there's no rule, there's no there's no what's the word, there's no mission or MO. Manifesto is what I'm trying to get. Manifesto. There's no manifesto of what is declaration of what art is. That's the word I'm looking for. So again, in this day and age, it's so important to identify and knowing why things are the way they are. Why by looking at a situation at many angles and perspectives, looking at the 180, knowing what you believe in and what your passions are is so important. Much more, much greater than following the trends of what people say. Even what I say may not work for everyone. This is just my own path, but I think that the perspective of looking at things holistically and not being too tied to certain certain groupthink mentalities is especially important in this day and age. So anyway, I don't want to ramble too much. I hope people understand what I'm saying. If I don't, I apologize, but just rambling my thoughts about the 180 rule. Um, like and subscribe if you need any questions about what I do, entrepreneurship, blah blah. Leave a comment, and I will talk to you all soon and continue on with this. I think it's very important for me to get the message out. I really feel that, especially now, what I've observed in the economy, especially in the creative industry, it's tough for a lot of people. And I hope that what I can provide and what I can share will give some insight into how I deal with things, how I go about my ways. And yeah, it is what it is. Okay, perhaps tomorrow I'll talk about NFTs. I know already people are like, oh my God. But it is what it is, folks. 180. All right. Talk later. Like, subscribe, and see you next time. Bye bye.